Chris Doering is with the SEC Network. With us now on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. Dunaway just mentioned A-Day. We normally don't talk about A-Day at this point of the year, Chris, here in this state, but here we are.
Yeah.
It's a different time for us.
It is a different time, and one that I imagine that the Alabama fans want to move ahead to, because it certainly hadn't been the year that I think a lot of people expected. And remember back in the beginning of the season, Nick Saban mentioned that last year was kind of a rebuilding year, a chance to try to figure out who the leaders were going to be going forward, as they lost so many from the 2020 team. And this was the year I think we all counted on, with Bryce Young being a returning starter, having Will Anderson around. Like, this was the year we thought they'd get back to winning a national championship, and for them to not even win the division that they're in is a little surprising.
Did everything play out like you thought it would yesterday?
You know what? Here's the thing. I don't think any of those three teams that were in the conversation for the fourth spot were really deserving, but it is a 4-team playoff, and so we had to stick somebody in there. I think it's probably the way that I was expecting it to play out, but it wasn't the way I necessarily would have agreed it to play out. Now, I'm not of the belief that Alabama shouldn't have been in that spot. I think I would have taken Tennessee with the same record and having beaten Alabama head-to-head. But I think Alabama, if they would have gotten into the field, probably would have been Vegas's second favorite team to win it all, given what they have in terms of player talent and what they have in experience in the postseason.
This has happened already twice now in Nick Saban's time in Tuscaloosa. He's changed some ways he and his program play football. Do you think with Georgia and Michigan and the old, quote, bully ball at the top of the standings again, do you think it's time for Nick Saban to reinvent the way Alabama recruits and plays football?
I don't think they need to reinvent what they're doing, the way they go about playing. I think they need to identify talent and develop that talent a little bit better. It's been surprising the last couple of years to see the offensive line not be as good as what we typically see in Alabama offensive line. Maybe personally, the thing that was most disappointing to me was to see the wide receiving core the way it was. The inconsistencies, the inability to get open, the drop balls, like those are things that we've not seen from Alabama receivers over the last few years. And we were spoiled. I think they had a great run of guys developing behind the man to be able to step up into that role. And you just didn't have that opportunity, present itself this year. The Jermaine Burton transfer was something you thought was going to be more impactful than it was. But at the end of the day, I really feel for Bryce Young more than anybody. I think Bryce Young, and I said it on our show this morning, Bryce Young is the best quarterback to have ever played at the University of Alabama. And for him to leave without a championship that he was the starting quarterback for is a little disappointing to me.
Chris Doering is with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline, SEC Network, at Chris Doering on Twitter, at Chris Doering28, or excuse me, CDoering28 on Instagram, CDoering28 on Instagram. You watched Georgia with your own two eyes Saturday. If last year's team was 100, what is this year's team? What grade is this year's team?
Yeah, I think there's a couple criteria that you need to look at. I would probably give that grade a 95. I don't think they're as complete a team as what Georgia was last year. Georgia, they had to bear the burden of trying to get that 41-year monkey off of their back. They blazed the trail that now has been set for this Georgia team to be able to follow in their footsteps. I think if you go back and statistically look at the defensive numbers, they're better in just about every defensive category in 2021 than they were this year, and that was against a better, more difficult schedule that team had to play. But replacing 15 guys that got drafted last year, replacing all the production on the defensive side particularly, has been a pretty impressive task that they've been able to accomplish and pass with flying colors. So I do think last year I would give them the nod a little bit as being the better team, but this year's team deserves a lot of credit, and I think the offense has become a little bit more explosive and evolved a little bit from where they were last year.
I know the SEC's got the top number one overall seed in Georgia. They would have 3 teams in if we had a 12-team playoff right now with Alabama and Tennessee as well. But did it feel like a down year in the SEC for you?
I don't know if it felt like a down year. I think it's a more NFL-like year. I think you're seeing a lot more parity as you look through the conference standings, seeing a lot of teams at the 4-4 mark, the 3-5 mark within the conference. I think that shows just how competitive both divisions have gotten. Even on the Eastern side, you look at Vandy, the floor has been elevated some with them taking down 2 SEC East foes in the last month of the season. It's just a very difficult conference. It's only going to get more difficult with Texas and Oklahoma eventually coming in. So I do worry about that, guys. I'm excited about the expansion of the playoffs. The margin for error becomes greater. But I think you're going to see a lot of cannibalism within the conference because of just how good it is from top to bottom.
You know, if I'm an Auburn fan today, I've got to love the portal because I'm seeing some meaningful names already jumping in there. What's your realistic expectations for Hugh Freeze at Auburn moving forward? How quick can this rebuild be? Because I'll take Lincoln Riley and USC out. I look at TCU and Sonny Dykes and I'm like, hey, how quick can that be Auburn?
I'm gonna flip this back to you guys here because I had this argument with Peter Burns, and Peter Burns says ridiculous things on our show. As you know, he made the comment on Friday as we were talking about Hugh Freeze. He said he believes that he can get Auburn to the college football playoffs in 2 years when it expands to 12 teams. Is that a realistic goal? Do you think that's something possible for Auburn given where they were this year?
I mean,
12 teams,
yeah, that'd give you in the 12 teams. That would give you 2 years. The way the portal works today, I could see Hugh Freeze doing that.
Yeah, and I think, Chris, I put the over/under at 3.5 SEC teams every year. I mean, if you look at LSU, if they wouldn't have had a complete fallout at the end of the season, you would have had 4 SEC teams this year. So yeah, I agree with these guys. I think Auburn could do it.
Yeah, I mean, 2-loss or 3-loss SEC teams in the mix to be, at the bottom end of that a 10 or 11 seed. I mean, it's going to be a Big Ten SEC heavy wild card.
Well, you guys mentioned it. Probably likely that we get 4 teams in on an annual basis. Georgia, we have to expect will be there. I just think it'll be difficult for Auburn to climb up into the top 3 with Alabama doing what they always do. LSU with the improvement they're inevitably going to make with Brian Kelly recruiting more there. You look at what Texas A&M has the talent. I don't know if they'll ever put it together there or not. I just think it's a tough task. And if we're judging guys on 2-year return on investment, that's a pretty daunting task for a lot of these guys, particularly in our conference.
Now, our answer shouldn't change the fact that we agree with you that Peter Burns says stupid, absurd things all the time. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Phil,
and Peter Burns throws him out there. Like, literally, we were walking out of the SEC championship game on Saturday. He goes, man, I'm so pissed. I was like, what are you pissed about? Not that LSU lost, but more pissed about the fact that the prognostication he made early in the year about Georgia not only winning every game they played, but they were going to do it by more than 10 points was proven to be false like 2 weeks in when Missouri took them to the fourth quarter and actually lost that game by single digits. But that was the thing he was more worried about than anything, was him being wrong about a prediction that otherwise would have been largely true.
Such a weird way to lose that one, too. It was Missouri of all teams.
No doubt.
Yeah. All right, he is Chris Doering. See him on the SEC Network and ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at Chris Doering, on Instagram at CDoering28. Thank you very much, Chris, for the time as always.
Thanks for having me, guys. Take care.
All right, buddy. Chris with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. Always good with his time with us.